Welcome, everyone, to tonight's webinar, Embracing Change, Seeing Change from a Different Lens. Tonight, we have a special guest joining us, Tendai. Tendai joined Toastmasters in March 2015. And over the 10 years he has been in the organization, he has experienced changes at a personal and external level that has shaped his leadership and communication development to embrace change. From losing his eyesight 9 months into his Toastmasters journey to coming back stronger to attain his distinguished Toastmaster recognition. Along the way, fighting battles with lockdowns, online meetings with dodgy internet connections, an uncooperative base camp, and making peace with pathways and base camp again. Tendai is the only Toastmaster in the world who travels 11,944 kilometers on a Tuesday morning at 7:15 a.m. with a white cane to attend his Toastmasters Club, Rising Tide in St. John, New Brunswick, all in the comfort of his own home in Zimbabwe. Today, Tendai will take you through his journey of embracing change, and he will share the principles he has learned on this journey and how you can develop the ability to see change from a different lens. So please help me welcome Tendai David Muranganwa tonight for his webinar. Welcome, Tendai.
Thank you, Jenny. Make that 11,944 kilometers on a Tuesday, 7 p.m. Canada time. Welcome everyone to our webinar on embracing change, seeing change from a different lens. If you look at the cover picture on my PowerPoint, that picture was taken in 2015 in South Africa at a Toastmasters District Conference. Now, if we were to go back into the past and ask that Tendai in that picture, or to tell him in that picture, 10 years from now, what would the world look like? And if you were to tell him that in the next 10 years, Donald Trump would be the president of the United States of America, he would go on to lose the next election and be re-elected again into the office. And all in this episode, also introducing a new word to the world, which is called tariffs. And in between all this, having a pandemic that changed our lives. And oh, by the way, you're also going to be blind. I'm sure that Tendai would have laughed at you to say, what? That is impossible. So for me, this picture is very special because even though I'm blind now, I still have a mental picture of that day and that memory in South Africa. And it also tells me what life is about when you talk about change. You never know where you are today and where you'll be tomorrow or in the next 10 years. So that picture really reminds me that we should never take for granted life. Life changes. There are so many things that happen to us. But what is important is always looking ahead to what the world and the future is for you. Next slide. So for my presentation today, I've got a simple task that I've got, which is to share 3 stories that are going to be reflecting on what change looks like, taking you through my personal story and personal experiences of how I experienced change and the 3 lessons that I learned, or the 3 principles that I actually got from those experiences. And at the end of this webinar, my goal or objective is that at the end of the day, you see change differently. Whenever you face change, you see it from a different lens and different perspective. You might have a different way of tackling change, but the most important thing that I would like you to get out of this webinar is having a different perspective on what change looks like. Next slide. Internal change. So internal change, if ever there is a difficult thing to deal with is internal change, because this happens within you. This has got so many emotional attachments to who you are as a person. So when I joined Toastmasters in March 2015, I really had a good time in those first 9 months. I remember in October, I had an opportunity to attend our district conference for District 74, which is in Southern Africa. And in that district conference, I actually became district champion in the humorous speech contest. And that's where I actually met the then international president, Jim Kokoki, who was in that photo. Little did I know that a few days down the line in November, I would be hospitalized and diagnosed with meningitis on 24 November 2015. And that meningitis diagnosis led to me becoming blind. And I remember after I was discharged from hospital, I went for multiple eye examinations at the doctors, and unfortunately, they could not save my eyes. They didn't really have any solution to what I could do to change that situation. And I remember after that process, I was advised to go for rehabilitative counseling sessions, and that was in 2016. And for me, it was really difficult because I couldn't believe that. So this is where I was now. I no longer see what will my future be like as someone with a disability, as someone who's visually impaired. And whenever I went for those multiple eye examinations, I always had that sinking feeling that, you know what, the writing is on the wall. The doctors were saying the same thing. Tendai, you've got optic atrophy. Unfortunately, your eyes are beyond control. They are no longer able to be saved. So it was very hard for me to accept that diagnosis from the doctors. And for the rest of 2016, I remember I was inactive. I wasn't even going to Toastmasters. And I decided then to go for rehabilitative counseling, talking to a psychologist. And I remember she would always encourage me to say, look, Tendai, you really need to start thinking about your future. Yes, you might be blind, but it doesn't mean that's the end of the world. For me, it was a very difficult change to accept, because, you know, if you were used to a certain type of life where you could see, you could drive, you could do your own things, now you're in a space where all those things have been taken away from you. So this is where I was. And I remember one of the things that I would do with my psychologist is that when I went to the sessions, I would always ask her for a book and pen. And I'd always try to write things, write my name, just to try and encourage myself to say, you know what, I can still see. But the reality was that I could no longer see. So eventually, the counseling sessions took into my mind to say, you know what, I need to move forward. And in 2017, I remember then making a decision to go for rehabilitation. This was actually rehabilitation for my blindness. And I attended what is called the Dorothy Duncan Center for the Blind here in Zimbabwe. And when I arrived at the center, it was an amazing experience for me. And this was the kind of place where you could wear your t-shirt inside out and no one would find out. So I had a memorable time, you know, seeing people just like me who had even lost their sight, but they could still laugh about it and, you know, still have a reason for living. So whilst at the center, I got trained in computers. I got trained how to move around on my own. And for me, this was a turning point, because what rehabilitation allowed me to do was to accept my visual impairment, because the difficult thing for me was to accept the change, which was losing my sight. And for me, rehabilitation was really an eye-opening experience for me, because it allowed me to accept what was within my control, which was to say, I can no longer see, but I still need to live my life. I still can contribute something meaningful to the world. And I remember even whilst I was at rehabilitation, that's when I actually then came back to Toastmasters. I remember my club, which was called Diplomatic Corps Toastmasters. They actually invited me to say, look, Tendai, you've been out of Toastmasters all along. Why don't you come back? there's no reason why you shouldn't continue your public speaking journey just because you are now blind. And that triggered that journey for me to actually come back to Toastmasters. And I remember in that process, I met an amazing lady called Lois Strachan from Cape Town, South Africa. She is also visually impaired. So she's someone who had also gone through a similar journey to mine. And she held my hand to say, you know what, Tendai, it's not the end of the world just because you are blind. There's still a lot that you can contribute. And I was able to come back to Toastmasters. And I remember at that time we used to have what was called the legacy program. Before we had Pathways project. But because I came back to Toastmasters, I was able to complete all those projects leading up to even attaining my Distinguished Toastmaster recognition. That the moment that I accepted my situation, it was painful. It wasn't something that was easy to accept. Being someone who's also spiritual, it was difficult because the hope was always that, you know what, one day I'm going to see. And today is 10 years from that time that I lost my sight. So even though I'm still in this space, but just being able to accept my situation allowed me to make that next step, that next decision to say, I need to go back to Toastmasters. I need to start thinking about my future. What can I do with the resources, with what I still have, whether it's my listening, whether it's my ability to walk, to talk, maximizing on what I still have. So that's one of the most powerful principles that I've learned with dealing with internal change. So internal change might not, for you, it might not be losing your sight. It might not be that dramatic. It could be losing a loved one. It could be even losing your health. You know, these days, there's so many health issues out there. And because this is something you cannot really run away from. It's different from something that happens afterwards, happening outside. But when it's where you get to a place where you just have to say, you know what, this is where I am. If I want to move forward in life, I just have to accept my situation and where I am. So that's the first principle when we are looking at embracing change. It's accepting where you are. It's accepting what has happened and looking at what is within your control. When I was going through my rehabilitation, one of the things that they always reminded us was that if you want to move forward in life, if you want to be able to embrace change, you need to take responsibility of your current situation. That's the only way that you can really be able to say, I've accepted my situation. So my hope is that I don't know what situation you might be going through, or maybe what personal change you might have gone through or are going through. But the first step is accepting it. And it actually starts within the mind to say, this is where I am. What can I do with my situation? Because the downside of not accepting or maybe delaying that acceptance is that you become stuck in one place. Like I said, for a whole year, I was just stuck at home, brooding. And I remember at some time I even got to a point where I wanted to end my life because I thought to myself, you know what, what's the point? There's really nothing that's coming out of my life because of my situation. But the moment that I accepted all those thoughts of trying to end my life, all those thoughts of trying to give up also disappeared with that acceptance of my situation. So that's my first principle when embracing change, is to accept where you are and focus on what's within your control. And once you make that step to accept your situation and your circumstance, you are now able to take the next step, which is to see what you can actually do with your life and with your situation, which moves me into my next principle and story around change. Next slide. External change. So once you've accepted your situation, you are going to occasionally experience external changes. So these are changes that happen outside of us. Usually these are things that are beyond our control. It could be your natural disasters. It could be like what happened with the pandemic, where, no one expected that would experience something that devastating, something that changed our lives. So for me, my experience when I then came back to Toastmasters was that, remember when I was sighted, back then we used to have manuals. We didn't have the pathways and the base camp that we now have. I could not read the actual physical manual. So I remember what I used to do was I would ask my niece, she would then do a recording of if it was, let's say, for example, an icebreaker, she would do the recording for me on my phone. Then I would then listen into the recording. So those are some of the things that I started to do within my Toastmasters journey to see how can I adapt to the current situation that's there. And in terms of external change, the pandemic, this was really tough on me because at that time we were meeting in person, and I really loved the in-person meetings because it was also a form of therapy for me, still trying to go through that rehabilitation of accepting the visual impairment situation. So all of a sudden, we're now stuck at home. I couldn't attend our physical meetings. And at that time, I didn't have a computer. I didn't have any internet access. So it meant that I could no longer attend my Toastmasters meetings. And this was the one place for me, which was my safe space, where I could learn, where I could grow, where I could smile, where I could also contribute something positive to my fellow club members. And all of that was taken away from me because of the pandemic. Fortunately, I was able to then get a computer and internet access. So that's when I then started looking at my current situation to say, in as much as I was no longer able to meet people physically, because of the online platform, I was now able to actually attend more club meetings than I could in the past because I could do it whilst I was at home. And I remember during that time in COVID-19, if you remember the picture on the cover page, there was a picture of myself, another gentleman from Zimbabwe, and past international president Jim Kokoki. So my memory took me back to that picture to say, in 2015, I met the international president. Why not reach out to him again to find out what's happening within that online space? And I remember reaching out to Jim. Initially, when I was looking for a club, I was looking for a club where I would grow as a professional speaker. This is a space which I wanted to go into. And Jim invited me to attend his club, which was Rising Tide Toastmasters, which I then eventually became a member since 2021. So what I loved about this experience was that in as much as there was a change through the pandemic, which, some people really failed or struggled to adapt to, but within that change, within that external change, the most important lesson that I learned is being able to adapt to the situations that are happening outside of you, especially when it comes to things that are outside of your control. The only way to really embrace the change is being able to adapt to the current situation that you are facing. So what I also loved about this situation is that because I adapted to the new online experience, it also gave me an opportunity to be a part of a club in St. John. So I always amuse when I attend our meetings every Tuesday. I'm here in Zimbabwe, but I'm able to connect with people across the world. And what I've also loved about that experience is that our club is a very diverse club with people from all over the world who are based in St. John. It has allowed me to appreciate what it means to be able to speak to an international audience. And all this was enabled because I embraced adaptability within that change paradigm to say, if I'm going to embrace change in my life, I need to adapt to whatever situation that I'm facing at that particular moment. And for me, this is actually something that I do on a daily basis because I'm blind. I'm most of the times going into spaces where I don't know what is ahead of me. But what really helps me to move forward is that ability to adapt to any situation that I may encounter, whether it's moving around on my own. If I want to move forward, I have to be able to adapt. So this is something that Toastmasters has really helped me as well in terms of embracing change. During that same period, if you still remember, we moved from the legacy program to pathways. In my introduction, Jenny mentioned that I had a battle with pathways. So what happened is when pathways was initially introduced, it was not accessible. Some of the paths were not accessible to people who were visually impaired. The platform was not accessible to someone who uses a screen reader. So it was really frustrating to say, look, I'm a member in good standing, but I can't access my learning material. So how am I supposed to benefit from the program? And for some time, I was thinking to myself, is this going to work out for me if the things are not accessible? But again, being able to adapt to that situation allowed me to look at the opportunities that are available to me. And like what I did with adapting with the manuals, I also adapted with pathways. I had a system where the vice president education would assist. They would go on the base camp for me. They would upload my materials. But I did not allow that situation to say, just because I'm not able to access the path, the platform, so I'm not going to do anything. So that has been my attitude or motto in terms of embracing change, being able to adapt to any situation. And when you are able to adapt to any situation, what happens is that you start to see new opportunities that are available to you. So for example, I'm here in District 45 presenting a webinar only because I made a decision to look out for Jim. I adapted to the situation that was there at that time. And through that connection with Jim, being a member of Rising Tide Toastmasters and being a member of District 45, I was now able to actually I'm able to present a webinar here at District 45. So imagine if I had not said yes to adapting to the situation, I wouldn't be here today. You wouldn't know that in Zimbabwe, across the world, there's someone called Tendai. So this is the power of being able to adapt when embracing change. Especially when you look at the world that we're living in today, there are so many changes that are happening outside of us. Some of those things they are not within our control. But the best way for us to really be able to embrace those changes is to adapt. I know there's a quotation, it should be Charles Darwin, which says, it's not the strongest or most intelligent species that survive, but it's those which are able to adapt the situation. So that's my encouragement to you today, to say, whatever situation you find yourself in, if you really want to move forward in your life, if you really want to embrace the change that's coming or that has come into your life, the best way is to adapt. And adapting means to say, what is it that is within my control? What are those factors that I can control? So I couldn't control the pandemic. It was something that affected everyone. I couldn't force our government to stop the lockdowns or to, stop quarantining and everything that was happening in that space. But what was within my control is to reach out to Jim. What was within my control is to continue on my Toastmasters journey. So that's the power of being able to adapt to change. When you make that decision to say, yes, I might be facing this situation. It could be personal, it could be external, but I am going to adapt. I'm going to focus on what's within my control. As I was preparing for this webinar, I reached out to Jenny and mentioned to her that we had a power outage since Monday and today is Tuesday. I could have easily canceled the webinar and said, you know what, I can't do the webinar because we don't have electricity. But I decided to say what is within my control. What was within my control in this situation was to make sure that my laptop was charged up for the webinar, was to make sure that I have some form of lighting so that the webinar would proceed. So that's really the power of adaptation. Regardless of what you face, regardless of the challenges, you still have a positive outlook. You don't lose sight of the goal. Like I mentioned for this webinar, it was for me to come here and share with you the power of embracing change. So regardless of the setbacks that I was facing behind the scenes, because I've developed that ability to adapt, I'm here today. And it's my hope that even as you go through this webinar, you also develop that ability to adapt to any situation that you may encounter in your life. So number one, accept. Number two, adapt. Next slide. So the next kind of change that you face, which is common, especially these days, is systematic change. In my introduction, I mentioned Donald Trump. So when Donald Trump became president this year, a lot of changes have been taking place. And one of those changes, especially like for me here in Zimbabwe and in most parts of Africa and in the developing world, is that a lot of funding that was coming to countries like Zimbabwe was stopped, and most of our health delivery systems depend on that funding. So it has created a situation where now most people are not able to access that healthcare that they were accessing because that funding is no longer there. So these kind of systematic changes are very challenging because, again, it's something that is like the external change is something that is outside of your control. You can't really put a button on it because it's something that happens because of decisions made by other people. Some of that systematic change can be artificial intelligence, can be changes in policy. And I know right now between the US and Canada, the relations have not been well because of the new tariffs that were introduced last week on the 2nd of April. And this systematic change, the good thing that I like about the systematic change is that it's something that you can actually anticipate. You know, when Donald Trump was campaigning, he mentioned all these things. And there are even actually videos up as far back as in the 1980s where he mentioned tariffs. So the secret to embracing change when it comes to systematic change, it's anticipating the change, looking at what's happening around you. So for me, within my Toastmasters journey, like I mentioned, Toastmasters shifted from the legacy program to pathways. And for a lot of people who are visually impaired, it was a difficult time because at that time, the platform was not accessible. So when I talk of accessibility, this is when you go onto the platform with your computer or a phone, you are not able to navigate some of the features that are on the website. You might try using your screen reader, but you can't get anything done. And what then happens is that you now then have to find someone to come and read for you. You now have to find someone to come and do what you need to do. So this was difficult, especially for me. And I remember for a very long time, I was a bit disappointed with Pathways because of that accessibility issue. And then what happened was that last year, Toastmasters mentioned, I know they were doing a lot of surveys where they talked about how they were going to improve the system, how they were going to change the system. So because now I was anticipating that change, I started practicing on the Basecamp platform to see if that those changes were taking place. And I was really excited because even before the new learning management system was launched, I realized that some of the features were now accessible, though some of the parts materials were not yet accessible. But because I had prepared myself for the change, it wasn't too difficult for me because it was something that I anticipated. And even up to now, I am really loving the Pathways platform because I don't have to wait for someone to come and read for me what's on my Basecamp. Currently at my local club here in Zimbabwe, I'm serving as a vice president education. And because of that accessibility, I've been able to actually approve the educational awards for some of our club members simply because I was able to anticipate that change and I was able to adapt as well to the current situation that was prevailing within the Basecamp platform. So again, when I think about it, when I look back to the time I came back to Toastmasters after being blind, if I had not accepted my situation of being blind, I would not have come back to Toastmasters. If I had not adapted to the new pathways program, maybe I would not be here today. And if I had not anticipated the new changes that were taking place within the Toastmasters and the Basecamp, I would most probably have given up on Toastmasters. But because I developed within myself that ability to say, look, I really need to look at what's happening around me. What are the changes that are taking place? Even when you look at artificial intelligence now, for those like if you are in the workspace, what does that change mean to you in your current profession, in your current career? I remember within the Toastmaster space, I didn't like, there's a time where I no longer liked the online meetings. I was looking to in-person meetings because of the physical interactions. But now I realized, because of anticipating the change, there's actually an opportunity for doing online presentations like what I'm doing today. But because I anticipated that change, I was able to embrace the change that was happening around me. So that is the principle of being able to embrace change when it comes to systematic change. Like what's happening now, if you are in Canada, the tariffs are there. So what do we do in terms of the current situation? We accept it, we adapt, we anticipate even more changes that might come, and we move forward with our lives. So that's the most important thing that I wanted to really share with you today about embracing change. You know, regardless of where you are in your life, like I said, your change might not be as dramatic as mine as losing your eyesight. But whatever change you might face in your life, it could be in your health, it could be in your finances, it could be in your career, it could be in your relationships. The one thing that I want you to always remember is to accept, adapt, and anticipate. So that's how you are able to really embrace change and see change from a different lens. So from this moment, I would like to open up the floor. If there are any questions around some of the issues that I was sharing with you in terms of how to deal with change. And also I would like to find out from you, how have you been dealing with change within your own space? Especially it could be what's happening right now with the tariffs, or even something that you also experienced within your own space.
Tendai, thank you so much. What an inspiration you are.
Yeah.
I don't have any questions per se, but I just wanted to
Mm.
say, for me, I love how you started with acceptance, and that's something I think about quite often in my own personal life. I'm a big fan of the serenity prayer, accept the things we cannot change. And so that's a reminder that I think about often throughout the day, even just for myself, like I can't change this, so I can accept it or move
Yeah.
on. And so I really liked thinking about, oh, this is a good point. This will be something I'll carry with me, because I can also think now, oh, well, how can I adapt to this, or what can I anticipate that's coming? So
Mm.
that was incredibly inspirational, and especially all that you've been through yourself in your personal journey over the last 10 years. Absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Thank you for that feedback. You know, like what you mentioned, one of the things that I've also realized about change is that, unfortunately, if you don't make a decision, you can actually become stuck, for a very long period of time. Like the rehabilitation school that I went to, we get a lot of adults, they rehabilitate adults who would have lost sight later on in life. And what I've noticed is that for those people who are able to accept their situation, they're able to move on with life. They're able to, some go on to start their own families, some go on to start businesses just because they've started with that first step of, making that acceptance to say, this is where I am. If I don't accept where I am, it means I'm going to remain just in that same space. So thank you for that feedback. I don't know if there's anything on the chat, if there are any other questions that have come through.
I haven't seen anything on the chat. Any other questions, Sherry?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. I really like how you broke it down, the accept, the adapt, and anticipate. And what I realized tonight is that, like Jenny, the acceptance is there. I tend to accept the position I'm in, no matter what it is, and I eventually adapt. I don't anticipate. So you've added something to my, can I call it my toolbox? You added something for me to add on to that, and I am going to work on that. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sherry, for that feedback. Yes. So when you look at the 3 stories that I shared and the principles that came out, accept, adapt, and anticipate. So with the first 2, accept and adapt, if you notice, they tend to be more reactive. So it's like you reacting to where you are, what the situation is. I know with accept, with the first situation, the story that I shared, you can't really predict being blind, and sometimes you can't predict maybe it could be losing a loved one. But for the first 2, they are more of reactive. But what I like about anticipate is that you are now becoming more proactive. You are not just waiting for things to happen, especially when we talk of things that are outside of your control. It could be within your profession, it could be the economy. These are things that you can anticipate. You can actually be proactive to look at and say, okay, this is what's happening. The tariffs are there, they've been announced. So what does this mean for my family? What does this mean for my job? What does this mean for my personal finances? So really anticipating change allows us to make those forward-thinking decisions to say, okay, from where I am today, what's the next step that I need to take? So for example, even when I look at my Toastmasters journey, I've been in Toastmasters for 10 years. So now what I'm anticipating is to say, what's the next step for me within Toastmasters? Yes, I've been doing the presentations. I achieved my Distinguished Toastmaster Award. But now I need to be more proactive. I need to anticipate more changes within myself as a speaker and leader. And this for me now looks like not just speaking here within the Toastmasters platform, but also speaking outside of Toastmasters. So I really believe, like what you said, it's something that's handy to have in your toolbox, that ability to anticipate change. Even like for those of you who are parents, looking at your children today, some of the things that are happening today, anticipating those situations for your children, what are the decisions that are being made by our leaders today? How are they going to affect? It could be your children, it could be your grandchildren. So it really helps us when we develop that proactive approach to dealing with change. So thank you very much, Sherry, for that feedback. Jenny, I don't know if there's any more feedback, any more questions, any more comments.
Any other questions or comments?
My other comment that I will say is I learned today is when we went from the paper manuals to the online, I assumed that it would be more accessible for those with low vision. And that that's a learning for me, that it wasn't as accessible as maybe I thought it would be. I'm really happy that it has moved forward and it is more accessible now, but certainly not out of the gate. It wasn't.
Yeah, excuse me. It was really, I know there's a group that's on Facebook for, I think it's people with different abilities. It was an issue that people were not happy with at the time, to say, we've launched this amazing new product within Toastmasters called Pathways, but accessibility, there seem to be still some issues. But what I like about Toastmasters is that they are always willing to listen to what we as the members, the feedback that we are giving them. And today I'm happy to report that, the platform is more accessible. And maybe also feeding off what you are saying, one thing that I've noticed, I'm not so sure about your situation, it could be in Canada or in the United States, we still don't have that many members with visual impairment joining Toastmasters. So that's also an issue around accessibility, to say, are our meetings are accessible? If we are meeting in person, are our meetings accessible to people with disabilities, people who are visually impaired? If it's in person, if it's online, have we created an environment where someone who's visually impaired can actually be able to be accommodated? And what I've loved about me being a member of Rising Tide, and also the clubs that I'm a member of here in Zimbabwe, is that my members also now appreciate what it means. I've sort of like become a change agent around disability, to say it's possible to accommodate someone with a visual impairment within Toastmasters. So change really can take different forms when you think about it. It's even what you do as a person. Someone can look at it and say, because Jenny has made this change in her life, so I think I can also go for it and have that similar change. So that has been my experience around visual impairment and accessibility. So we still have got a lot of work in terms of now getting more people with visual impairments to join Toastmasters. Jenny?
There's one comment. Cheryl posted a quote actually in the chat, so I'll read that. It says, "It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change," which is a quote from Charles Darwin.
Yes. And really, that's something that's really true for me in my life. Because like I said, when I go out there, I'm going in a world where I cannot see what's out there. There are cars, there's so much that's happening out there. But because I've allowed myself to adapt to the current situation, it has allowed me to move forward, even though I might not be able to see what's ahead of me. But because within me, I've got that adaptability, I can face whatever comes into my life. And also something that has just come into my mind, when I came back to Toastmasters, there are certain aspects of being a speaker and a leader. For example, if you're communicating, you look at someone's gestures, you look at someone's facial expressions, you look at someone's body language. All those things are things that we are taught here in Toastmasters. So I then realized I might be disadvantaged when it comes to eye contact, for example. I might not be able to clearly have an eye contact with the audience because I'm not able to see them. But what I've realized is that I've got something special that people who are sighted might not have, which is my sense of hearing. And this is something that whenever I come to Rising Tide Toastmasters, one of the things that I love doing is being a speech evaluator. or being the general evaluator, because I've realized that I might not be able to, for example, if Sherry is doing a presentation, I might not be able to see your body language, your gestures, but I'm able to listen to your presentation. So that's one thing again about embracing change. You focus on what you have, what's within your control. And for me in Toastmasters, that has been my listening skills, to say my sense of hearing is now 10 times sharper. Why not maximize on becoming a better evaluator? Why not maximize on becoming a better listener? So if you are thinking of change again, instead of, focusing on what you lost, you can actually focus on what you still have, what is still within your control. Like I said, for me, it's my sense of hearing, it's my sense of listening. When I come into speech, into our meetings, I'm listening into everyone speaking, because that's now my superpower, as it may be. So that's my feedback in terms of the quote that Sherry shared on. It's not the strongest or most intelligent that really survive, but it's those individuals who are able to adapt. And for me, I would go a step further and say, it's those people who focus on what they have and not necessarily on what they lost.
Amazing. Thank you,
Yeah.
Tendai. I think those are all the questions I see.
Mhm. Thank you. And how are we doing on our time?
We're doing great.
You're doing great. That's fine. So if there are no other questions, I know this is going to be also put up on our District 45 YouTube channel. So for those if you're going to be listening on YouTube, I'd love you to also put in the comments your feedback, your thoughts, your experiences around change. What does change mean for you? What does change look like for you? And also, what stood out for you in my presentations and the stories that I shared with you today. So closing up my presentation, I'll go back again to the cover page of my PowerPoint presentation today. That picture of myself, the other gentleman in the picture, by the way, is called Daveson, Distinguished Toastmaster Daveson. He was our division director at the time, and the other gentleman is past international president Jim Kokoki. So what I love about this picture is that I can still visualize the taxi that I was inside and Jim looking from outside in. The taxi, I can still visualize the memories, the experience. And it amazes me that it's now been 10 years since I lost my sight, all the changes that have happened, within me personally, the changes that have happened outside in the world. But what has kept me going strong, which I also want to leave with you, is this. Whenever you face change, accept, adapt, and anticipate. And my final parting words to you is this: regardless of, what you go through in life, regardless of the challenges that you might face, in fact, I want you to do something. I want to welcome you into my world. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to close your eyes. One of the things that I appreciate about being visually impaired is that I get to see and connect with people like you and me. We all have a story to share, and we all face setbacks, and we all face changes in our life. But I want to leave you with this. Whenever you face a setback in your life, I want you to make this promise to yourself: I will keep moving forward. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you,
you
Jenny, and
so
that's
much,
it from
Tendai.
me.
Amazing. You are an inspiration. That was absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your story and sharing that. And best of luck to you on your contests, your upcoming contests with the international speech. If it's anything like this, I think you're going to do a fantastic job competing, and really, really appreciate you joining us tonight and sharing your story and being an inspiration. I think this is going to be an excellent webinar that I hope we'll make sure we promote and get a lot of people to see. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you as well, and thank you to Sherry. I was just thinking when